During a 40,000-kilometer road trip from the top of North America to the bottom of South America, there is bound to be a leg of that journey where the going gets tough, the hardships multiply, and you've just got to learn the lessons the hard way. We're two Canadians traveling the Pan American Highway, a road stretching, for us, from Tuktoyaktuk, Canada to Ushuaia, Argentina. This journey will take us approximately 2 years to complete as we explore the Americas while driving south until we reach the very bottom. There are some big lessons awaiting us along the way. For two people who have spent the majority of their lives in colder climates, Central America is about to teach us not only about vastly different cultures and different ways of life, but how life occurs in vastly different climates. We're about to step into the hottest 2.5 months of our lives, and we're going to do it without any air conditioning in our adventure mobile. Epic tropical vistas, sweat, and Central America lie ahead, so buckle up and let's roam. We have just entered into the country of Belize. It's our first country in Central America. As a means of getting our bearings and starting to make a plan, we followed the coastline from the border crossing to a small beach just east of Sarteneja. This spot looks like a postcard. White sand beach, palm fronds waving in the wind, and waves gently lapping at the shore. We're not entirely sure what we're going to be doing in Belize yet, but we know we won't be spending much time on the coast or in the more touristy areas. We've quickly learned since making it this far south that the coastline is where the heat and humidity are, and we're finding the heat challenging, especially in a van that was insulated for far lower temperatures. From what we've seen on the map, there's some pretty cool stuff to explore inland in Belize, so that's where we're going. Our first planned destination is at the very southern end of Belize, near the small town of Punta Gorda. Two of our subscribers have offered up their Airbnb to us for a few nights, so we'll drive the length of the country, then turn back north and start exploring a little bit deeper. First fruit in Belize.
Yeah.
Does it look excellent?
Yeah, it looks okay. It looks good. Spendy.
A little bit pricier than Mexico.
Oh yeah, but probably still cheaper than the US.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, maybe about the same for tropical fruits in the US. It's their specialty item.
Belize is a fairly small country. From north to south, it spans only 280 kilometers, and if you drive continuously, you can complete the length in roughly 5 to 6 hours. We try not to drive more than 5 hours a day, and we know of a riverside spot we can camp at tonight, so we'll only do about 3.5 hours of driving to roughly midway down the country. We're on our way So we are on our way to a river spot for the night, and we had to go through like a security checkpoint or something like that to drive this road. And the lady told us to be careful because lots of people go there, so I guess we're gonna find out what that means. As we begin to make our way into the southern regions with higher temperatures and lower mountains, what we seek out in a camp spot has changed a little. Instead of high elevation or mountaintop spots that are tucked away out of sight, our focus has gone to bodies of water where we can cool off before we go to bed. Belize thus far has undeniably felt like a different country to what we've experienced while traveling through Mexico. It has a notably different culture, English is the main language in the country, and if you look closely, you can see the many telltale signs of a country that once was a British colony. With Central America being predominantly Latin American culture, Belize doesn't seem like it fits here. Nevertheless, it's a small country packed with beauty, and we're grateful to be exploring here. The next morning, we're on the move again before the sun gathers its power. We have another few hours to drive and a jaguar preserve to visit. We've come to the Coxcomb Basin Wildlife Preserve. This sanctuary in southern Belize is famed as the world's first jaguar preserve. Established in 1986 after Alan Rabinowitz documented unusually high jaguar densities here, it now protects roughly 400 square kilometers of tropical forest in the Stan Creek district. The sanctuary spans two lush basins on the eastern slopes of the Maya Mountains, ranging from low river valleys to peaks over 1,100 meters high. Rich with waterfalls, dense jungle, and abundant wildlife from tapirs to howler monkeys, it stands today as one of Belize's most important strongholds of biodiversity and conservation. I'll reiterate that water has become of utmost importance in staying cool. This creek and waterfall felt like heaven on earth.
So after cooling off, we're now hiking up to the bluff. And we passed a couple that said that it's hot and there's no wind, and they were 1,000% right.
Cool. Is that it? Not bad.
Yeah, that one's
Awesome.
Climbing up to the viewpoint and looking out over the preserve was a nice treat. It had been a long time since we had looked out over an untouched stretch of jungle where there was no signs of human life present. On our way out to the preserve, we stopped off to visit the crash site of a Cessna 172 used for jaguar observation. The crash had occurred in 1984 when the plane was taking off and clipped a tree shortly after rotation. The pilot and photographer on board suffered only minor injuries, and the carcass of the crashed plane remains here as a point of interest in the preserve. After visiting the preserve, we continued south towards Punta Gorda in our Airbnb for a couple nights. It had been months since we'd slept in a bed other than in the van, so it was a nice chance to stretch out and enjoy some house life for a moment.
cutie.
Let me identify.
Okay, so we are currently on our way to what is called the Inland Blue Hole. Belize has another famous attraction called the Blue Hole. This is the one that's just inland. I don't know exactly what it is.
It's a pool.
Oh, okay, it's a pool. And currently, temperature is probably like 39, feels like 42. So
We're sweating.
Yeah, so we're sweating. And for our American viewers, I think that's something like 110.
105 or 110, yeah.
Yeah, it's hot, hot.
It's raining and it's cool.
What do you smell?
Petrichor.
Yeah.
Check out the road steaming.
Oh yeah. Look at those pine trees.
Yay. We found a mountain in Belize.
It's like we're in a completely different country all of a sudden.
It's like we're at home.
We can find home pretty much everywhere.
Pine trees and rain.
We had made our way to the Mountain Pine Ridge Forest Reserve, a wildlife area located in the central east of Belize. Here, you can climb to a slightly higher elevation and experience a unique pine forest area. There are many trails leading to different attractions scattered throughout the preserve, one of which we turned onto from the main highway as soon as we could in search of, you guessed it, water. The thunderstorm that had passed over this region minutes before we had arrived left the strange, sandy clay-like dirt a muddy mess, making for a rather entertaining trip through the forest.
Oh my gosh.
So beautiful.
Where are you going, hon?
We're going to Rio on pools, right?
Ooh, I think so, yeah. Rio on. I wonder what that stands for. Means. Who wants to see those?
None. Nobody.
The Mountain Pine Ridge Reserve was quickly becoming one of our favorite places within Belize. It has lots of water features to cool off in, pine trees that make it feel like home, trails to wander along, and massive caves to explore. Unfortunately, with our exit out of the country the next day, we ran out of time to visit the Caracol Natural Monument at the south end. a place that lots of people told us afterwards we should have explored. I guess we'll just have to come back one day. The next place we visited was the Rio Frio cave within the preserve. This was by far the biggest cave either of us had ever stepped foot in, and thus resulted as one of our highlights during our visit to Belize. Before finding a place to camp that night, we stopped in at the last water feature to cool off. This here is Big Rock Falls. After a little hunting for camp, we eventually found a spot off what looked to be an old logging road. As soon as we parked up, dark rain clouds rolled in and we were treated to yet another thunder and lightning storm.
Oh my gosh! Our bathing suit.
Then it was time to leave the country of Belize and enter into the next, Guatemala. In total, we spent a week in Belize. Obviously not enough time to do the country justice. There's simply so much to explore. However, the way we've scheduled this trip puts us in South America between rainy seasons, leaving us with only a few months to travel through all the countries in Central America. Belize was a welcome surprise, a beautiful country, and we really enjoyed our time there.
Welcome to Guatemala. More groceries?
Yeah. Look at this avocado.
What?
Had to try it.
One second. Don't forget to stop off at Pollolandia and get your pollo.
Oh man, should we get an ice cream cake as well? A chicken and an ice cream cake?
YOLO, right?
He convinced me to get ice cream before breakfast, really.
It wasn't hard to convince her.
Breakfast ice cream. It's coffee flavored, so it counts as breakfast.
Cheers. First ice cream in Guatemala. Today at first. Oh, that's good.
First order of business in Guatemala after restocking on food, water, and fuel was to go collect our friends Daniel and Josephine of Project Unbound, who we would be traveling with for our first week in the country. Once linked up with them, we'd be heading straight for the Mayan city of Tikal to do a sunrise tour.
Here we go!
Into Tikal.
a giant Mayan city.
Super excited.
Welcome to the van at 4 o'clock in the morning. Earliest we've been awake in years.
We're not sunrise people.
No.
That didn't scare the shit out of me at all. Oh, that is such a terrifying sound.
At 5 a.m. in the morning, we climbed the staircase to the top of the highest tower in the city of Tikal, and there sat in silence as the world woke up around us. Birdsong and the sounds of wildlife from the jungle filled the air and seemed to rise in voluminous chorus as the sun slowly climbed its way up and over the horizon. Over the next couple hours, we walked through the ruins, learning about the various different buildings, their uses, and construction. We learned about the Mayan civilization and how Tikal worked as a focal point for commerce, cultural ceremony, and life in the jungles of Central America.
Those are some big steps.
Once the tour had completed and the temperatures had climbed back into the high 30s, it was time to move in search of somewhere to cool off. We'd spotted a pretty neat looking spot about 4 hours south, so we hit the road and made our way through the sweltering heat to camp for the next 2 nights. This is Crater Azul, a spring-fed river with crystal clear water and a large crater-like swimming hole, the perfect place to hunker down for a while when it's hot out. And when I say the water is crystal clear, I mean it is crystal clear. As the temperatures continued to climb into the 40s and drinking water and food began to dwindle, we packed up camp and made a break for the mountains. As much of northern Guatemala is a lower elevation plain, it wouldn't be until we gained elevation in the mountains that we'd find an escape from the heat. One of the lessons we were quickly learning in this part of the world is how much our travels can be characterized by climate. We set out on this trip knowing that this leg of the journey would be a little more challenging as the temperatures began to climb. Our van doesn't have any form of air conditioning other than opening the windows. We didn't have time or money to change that before we left, and in addition, we insulated our van for cold temperatures. To top it all off, the heat produced by our engine and transmission rises up into our living space and collects there. By the end of a long drive day, the interior temperature of our van was often a few degrees warmer than the outside air temperature. Very quickly, the only thing that we could think about was how hot we were and how we couldn't escape it. There have been folks that claimed we're complaining about it. We're not. We're just sharing our experience in hopes that people can learn from it. Not enough overlanders talk about the challenge of spending 24 hours a day for weeks on end in temperatures above 35 degrees Celsius, especially if you're someone who's lived in the north their entire lives. After some scouring of the Google satellite image, we found a road leading down towards a river with a promising spot to camp. When we arrived there, we realized we had rolled into a local's washing area. After asking to see if it was okay to camp there, we met with the chief of the village, and with a small donation to the community, we were allowed to stay the night.
Yes. Yes. Hi, Inyo. Hi, Inyo.
When we awoke the next morning, the air was filled with the sound of the dense natural world surrounding us. Birds, bugs, and flowing water. Soon after, locals began arriving at the riverside to do their washing. Kids watched our every move and peered into the vans with intense curiosity. After our brief morning rituals, we packed up and hit the road once again. We have been told numerous times not to use Google Maps in Latin America, and we know exactly why. But we're also not trying to get to our destination by the most direct route possible. It was with no surprise that after a few hours of driving, we were on what we like to call a Google Special, a route that leads to some kind of adventure. In this case, a dirt road leading through remote villages perched high in the mountains. Suddenly, we were experiencing what it's like for locals on their daily commute to town. Tight, narrow, and winding roads with a steep drop-off on one side and jungle-covered hillside on the other. Although rarely what we had planned, we do love a Google Special.
Actually not that long.
We were on our way to a well-known location in Guatemala called Semuc Champey. It's another crystal clear river, but this time it has cascading waterfalls filling beautiful pools where you can swim and lounge for hours. After a night slept in the parking lot of the entrance to the river, we made our way down to the water and spent the day beating the heat and getting sunburned. following evening, we made our way up the hill to a hostel that allows overlanders to stay in their vehicles on the lawn. We stayed there for 2 nights while waiting for our British friends David and Ellie of Yak Overland to arrive. With David and Ellie's arrival, we bid farewell to Daniel and Josephine, packed up camp, and departed the hostel. Our British friends are on their final leg of a world tour. Having shipped their Land Rover to Uruguay, they're making their way south to north on the Pan American Highway. Having recently made the leap from Cartagena, Colombia to Veracruz, Mexico, they're dipping into Guatemala before turning back north. Unfortunately, driving a right-hand drive vehicle through Honduras and Nicaragua is prohibited, and with only a few months to make it to Dead Horse, Alaska, they only have time for Guatemala. With David, Ellie, and Yak in tow, we'd be heading to a waterfall called Salto de Chalasco. We had about 4 hours of driving ahead of us, which would take us along winding roads that weave endlessly through the Guatemalan mountains, through small villages, roadside markets, and down bumpy gravel roads. We made camp in a gravel parking lot just outside the town of Chalasco. The next day, we'd make the 3-kilometer hike to the waterfall. We've timed our travels through Central America fairly well. As we approach the rainy season and only experience smaller showers in the afternoons, paths like this are dry and easy to hike, and waterfalls like the one we're going to see still have a pretty good flow. Salto de Chalasco, located in the cloud forest of Baja Verapaz, stands at a height of approximately 133 meters. This towering waterfall sits inside the Reserva de la Biosfera Sierra de las Minas, surrounded by lush biodiversity. Visitors to the area will see orchids, huge ferns, conifer trees like pines and cypress, and if they're lucky, may spot the national bird of Guatemala, the quetzal. With our visit to the falls complete, it was time to part ways with David and Ellie. They would be heading directly south towards Antigua, and we'd be heading west towards Lake Atitlan.
Bye, guys. Bye.
We were aiming to camp that night at the Chixoy Reservoir, Unfortunately, Meg had been feeling pretty sick since the hostel, so she went to sleep in the back of the van, and I focused on driving. 3 hours later, we turned onto a gravel road and followed it out towards the reservoir. The Chixoy hydroelectric dam spans the Chixoy River at the borders of Alta Verapaz, Baja Verapaz, and El Quiche in Guatemala. Completed in the mid-1980s after construction began in 1976, it is the largest hydroelectric facility in the country and provides about 15% of Guatemala's electricity. The dam wall is roughly 90 to 110 meters tall and about 250 meters long, forming a reservoir that holds around 424 to 460 million cubic meters of water. Its construction was highly controversial and led to the displacement of thousands of Maya Achi people and is linked to the tragic Rio Negro massacres in the early 1980s. Despite its dark past, the surrounding area and our view from camp is still incredibly beautiful, and the following morning put on a brilliant sunrise display. With Meg's sickness seemingly worsening, we made the decision to get to high elevations and cooler temperatures as quickly as we could. Lake Atitlan sits at 1,562 meters above sea level and promised a good spot to make camp for a few nights, but it was still a 2-day drive away. Although it was only about 210 kilometers from where we'd camped at the reservoir, the roads here in Guatemala are slow going. The first day, we'd wind up doing an 8-hour drive only to make it a little beyond halfway to the lake. Luckily for us, the second day of driving was a little less intense and we were able to make it onto faster moving roads. But that's not to say there wasn't our fair share of traffic, winding roads, and crazy drivers to navigate through.
Come on, buddy, you can do it! I can't go any slower, man! Go, 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 go! Oh, here he goes, here he goes! Oh my gosh! Oh my god! Look at that, look at that! Oh my gosh!
Eventually, we were traveling through the town of Solala on our final descent towards the lake. It seemed as though the quantity of colorful chrome-lined chicken buses was starting to rapidly increase, making it rather hard for me to stay focused on the road. We made camp right beside the lake, sat down in our chairs, and let out a sigh of relief. The cool mountain air and breeze coming off the lake made the memories of the sweaty drive days drift away as though they had never happened. Then we experienced our first real tropical storm. A maelstrom of wind and rain barreled across the lake and hit us broadside. We sat in the van as it rocked side to side, and the noise of the rain hitting the van made it hard to talk to each other without raised voices.
Holy heck, this is a proper storm!
I've never seen this much rain.
Yeah, we haven't seen this much rain in 6 months.
Woo.
Holy moly! Whoa! Awesome! Yeah!
Unfortunately, soon after we had arrived at the lake, I also came down with whatever Meg had, so we decided to stay put for a few more days. We were due to go to Antigua to attend some Spanish lessons and hike Volcano Fuego, but ultimately had to delay. As much as we wish our time at Lake Atitlan could have been different, it was characterized by intense stomach pain and other resulting symptoms. Nevertheless, the views were absolutely splendid and our time was really relaxing. We left with really good memories of our time spent on the shores of Lake Atitlan. The day eventually came to leave Lake Atitlan and drive to Antigua. We hopped on the actual Pan-American highway for a short time, spotting plenty of chicken buses as we drew ever nearer to Guatemala's old capital. Antigua, Guatemala is a colonial gem tucked into the central highlands of Guatemala around 1,530 meters above sea level. Founded in the early 1500s by the Spanish, it once served as the capital of the Captaincy General of Guatemala. The architecture here tells of a long history. Baroque churches, monasteries, grand facades, and cobblestone streets laid out in a Renaissance-style grid. Antigua has weathered earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and the persistent effects of time. Many buildings remain in ruins, but others have been lovingly restored, making for a rather interesting compare and contrast effect as you walk through the streets. Declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1979, Antigua is more than a preserved relic. It lives in its color, its festivals like Semana Santa, its vibrant markets, and its views of volcanoes like Agua, Fuego, and Acatenango that guard its horizons. After a week of Spanish lessons in the city, it was time to hike. We had booked a guided hike with Blue Sky Adventures and would be hiking to the peak of Volcan Acatenango, where we would hopefully see Volcano Fuego erupting. With the peak of Acatenango sitting at just under 4,000 meters and our hike starting around 2,400 meters, we gained nearly 2 kilometers in vertical elevation. At this elevation, the air thins out to where we get roughly 60% of the oxygen per breath as we'd normally get down low. Although the trail is well maintained and the grade isn't too extreme, it was still a slog to get to camp. At camp, just below the summit of Acatenango, we were rewarded for our efforts almost immediately. And it's a reward we will never forget. As we sat there and watched, clouds rolled in around the base of the 2 volcanoes, obscuring views of the towns and farmland below. Based on their structure that we could see from above, they were dense storm clouds that were gathering, alluding to what was to come. For hours we sat there eagerly awaiting each eruption. With every time a puff of smoke and molten rock elicited from Fuego, we were hit by what sounded like a sonic boom. We never tired of watching the spectacle. Towards nightfall, our position on the side of the volcano was completely socked in. Feeling a little defeated that we wouldn't see any eruptions at night, we went to bed in an attempt to sleep, hoping to be rested for the early hike the next morning. But Fuego had other plans.
Yes! 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 Oh my gosh. This is fucking awesome. Oh. It's so good. It's still going. It's so good.
Woken up by another sonic boom, I peeked my head out of the cabin to see if the clouds had cleared, and there was Fuego lit up by molten rock. That's when I realized that it wasn't an eruption that had actually woken me, it was thunder and lightning. Although we'd barely slept that night, we were still up at 4:30 a.m. to begin our hike to the summit.
How's everyone feeling this morning?
Already gassed.
Not too bad. I need your energy. Hey!
Estamos cerca. Wow. Ah, it's amazing.
This, hands down, will remain one of the most memorable experiences on the Pan American Highway. With our Spanish lessons and volcano hike finished, it was time to start our departure from Guatemala. We had received shipping dates for our van to be sent across from Panama City to Cartagena, Colombia. The time left to travel through the remaining countries in Central America was a mere 4 weeks. The shipping of your vehicle past the Darien Gap is a vital and expensive step in the journey down the Pan American Highway, and one we did not want to miss, so we'd need to accelerate our travels from here. With a rainy day drive from Antigua through the remainder of Guatemala, we had arrived at the El Salvador border. Arriving a little earlier than we had expected, we decided to cross in the late afternoon. 2 hours later, we were crossing into the next country on the Pan American Highway. Our first camp in El Salvador was at the confluence of two hot rivers just 30 minutes south of the border. We had roughly 7 days planned to explore El Salvador, and luckily for us, there are plenty of volcanoes in the country, many of which are lined up in a row as you travel south. With our route basically already planned, we could travel through the country without thinking too much about where to go. Our first destination would be Volcán Santa Ana, a mere 2-hour drive away. Volcán Santa Ana, also known as Yamatepec, is the highest volcano in El Salvador, rising to 2,381 meters above sea level. It belongs to the Los Volcanos complex in the Apaneca-Yamatepec Ridge, located about 65 kilometers west of San Salvador. The crater spans roughly 1 kilometer in diameter and reaches about 350 meters deep, containing a striking turquoise sulfur lagoon. Santa Ana is still active. Its most recent major eruption was in 2005, and it continuously emits gases like sulfur dioxide from fumaroles in its crater. Ironically, despite volcanoes being known for their heat, they also offer up high elevation places to escape from the heat at lower elevations.
Allá tengo yo de venta zapatos.
After 2 nights spent at the trailhead of the Santa Ana hike, we started up the van and headed down the mountain. The next place on our map was another volcano, but this time, instead of scalding hot water, we'd be able to take a dip in refreshingly cool water. We travel down the mountain and make our way across the patchwork valley of farmland, through the country's capital of San Salvador, and then slowly climb up and over the rim of a giant caldera, where eventually we'd park up beside Laguna Ilopango.
Pavement. They're almost on the road. What a feat.
We stayed here 2 nights, soaking up the chance to be lakeside with beautiful views all around. During the day, we were surrounded by locals coming to enjoy the water. Then at night, things quieted down and we could enjoy the calm and silence of the lakeshore.
Maybe not head.
If you're ever feeling short on volcano views, volcano hikes, or anything related to volcanoes in your life, book a flight to pretty much any country in Central America and your cup will runneth over with volcano experiences. From Laguna Ilopango, we headed straight for Laguna de Alegria, yet another small pocket of water that had collected inside of a volcano. We only spent 1 night here, but our time was filled with conversations with locals, birds chattering in the trees, and the slow drift of clouds past the sun. We never thought we would camp in so many volcanoes in our lifetime, but here we are. The next day would be our last full day in El Salvador. We made our way from Laguna de Alegria to Laguna Ilopango, where we'd camp our final night in the country. On our way there, we snuck under a looming storm cloud, but as we got to camp, the skies opened up and dropped a massive load of rain. Rainy season was just gathering momentum here in Central America, and daily showers were something that we would have to get used to. The following morning, we woke to stillness over the lake with a view of Volcan San Miguel in the distance. When crossing borders, we try to arrive at the border early in the morning on a Saturday. Although it was only our 4th border crossing that we had arrived in the morning on this trip, with the exception of El Salvador, we found that this timing works best for us to get across in decent time to allow us a travel day on the other side.
Well, wouldn't you know it? Fastest border crossing yet. At exactly an hour.
Yep.
We are officially in Honduras.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, 10 minutes after crossing into Honduras, we were pulled over by police and nearly issued a fine for the off-road lights on the front of the van. Our Spanish at this point still wasn't that good, and I think the officer let us go in frustration. But after that encounter, we were a little worried about the potential for similar situations ahead. The Pacific coast portion of Honduras being as short as it is, we decided to go to the next town to ship our drone, which we can't bring into Nicaragua, and then drive the rest of the way to the Nicaraguan border. It's not the decision we wanted to make, but sometimes you just have to do what's best in the moment, despite your plans. In total, we'd only spend one night in Honduras.
Well, it's certainly not our most glamorous camp. It's raining.
So nice. Ah.
The next morning, we'd be crossing into Nicaragua, a border crossing we'd heard and read so many reviews saying that it was the most challenging and long border crossing in Central America, and they weren't wrong.
Straight up on the sidewalk?
Well, this is certainly interesting. This is fun.
We're on the
Just
sidewalk.
driving across the sidewalk. Well, holy heck!
3 hours later.
It lived up to its hype.
Well, not really.
I mean, we weren't there for 5 hours, but still, like...
But it wasn't intimidating at all. Like,
Yeah.
we didn't get the 3rd degree. The van barely got searched. Half of the time was spent registering our binoculars.
Yeah, so for future reference, for all of you who are going to travel through Nicaragua, just leave the binoculars at home. Because that was so stupid.
But we've heard of that happening to people with not kitchen knives, so it just seems completely random what can happen at the border.
Yeah.
But we were the most worried about our camera lenses, and there wasn't a single question about them, so all good.
So we're done. We're in Nicaragua. Woo!
Ultimately, our crossing into Nicaragua was relatively easy. We've had friends get held up for far longer than we did, so in hindsight, we're thankful that we made it across in a mere 3 hours. Rolling through Nicaragua for the first few kilometers, we noticed a distinctly different country than what we'd seen in previous countries in Central America. Horse and buggy is still used often, the number of people riding bikes increased considerably, and the roads were in far better condition than most we'd seen. It was an interesting change to say the least. We wouldn't be spending too long in Nicaragua, as our drone would be arriving in Costa Rica in a few days and only held for a short period of time. But in that time, we wanted to hike. We'd learned of somewhere we could camp for free up the side of Volcan Telica, but it would require us to drive some 4x4 roads to get there. Well, believe it or not, we've got a free spot here in Nicaragua. We're camped here tonight in the middle of a soccer field, and tomorrow morning we're going to attempt to make it to the start of a hike to the top of a volcano. Now, pretty much everything on iOverlander has suggested that anything that is not four-wheel drive won't make it, but they haven't met the slow roamers yet.
Yeah.
We found more often than not that reports of road severity are typically a little inflated, and roads that other travelers deemed impassable or extremely challenging tend to be more or less totally fine for us to drive. Our experience of this road was just that, save for one section that we had to winch up. Otherwise, it was just enough difficulty to make it a fun side adventure in our home on wheels. When we did the big rebuild of the van in 2024, we installed a 10,000-pound winch. I never expected to use it as much as we have, and I suspect we'll have to use it many more times as we continue south from Central America. At this point, the van doesn't have quite enough gumption to make it up and over the crest of this very steep section of the trail. Luckily, when we stopped, there was this ledge that I could winch off to get us the last few meters. We found that road builders in Central America seem to build with only light four-wheel drive trucks in mind, and thus we have experienced some of the steepest grades we've ever seen. The one modification we desperately wish we had installed in the van before we left is a transfer case.
Traffic on the trail.
Yeah, we're in troopy country now.
Heavy, underpowered, and undergeared van aside, we finally crept our way slowly to the parking lot at the trailhead, a victory hard won by our trusty old home on wheels.
And there's the rain!
That is a lot of water.
It's a lot of water.
The drops are like, they almost look like snow, they're so big.
We were high enough up, and with the combination of the rains the evening prior, the air in the morning was cool, and a consistent wind at our backs seemed to carry us up the mountainside. It felt like no time at all that we were approaching the crater and peering down into a pit that we could only describe as a hellscape.
Holy smokes.
Whoa! This is scary.
Wow.
superheated steam rose from out of the loose hillside below, obscuring our view of the bottom, which lay an imperceptibly long way down. It was an eerie experience, but also humbling. The power of which places like this are formed will forever remain impressive to us. As the last of the cold chills ran down our spines and we shook off the feeling of imminent danger, we made our way back down to the van and finished our descent to the highway below. A few more hours of driving, we found camp on the side of Lago Cocibolca, with a view of Ometepe across the water. This would be our last camp in Nicaragua. Upon arriving at the Costa Rican border, it took us about an hour and a half to cross out of Nicaragua due to some miscommunication. We walked and drove in circles until we finally found the person to give us the last stamp and scribble on a piece of paper along with 4 other stamps and scribbles that we eventually handed to a man at the exit, and we were finally allowed to cross. After picking up our drone, we made our way directly to Lake Arenal in the province of Guanacaste. 2 of our Canadian subscribers own an Airbnb on the lakeshore and had offered us a stay. After months of traveling and living in the van where the temperatures were consistently in the 30s, a few nights' stay in an air-conditioned room was definitely not something we were going to pass up. We spent 3 days inside, in the cool air, free of sweat, and able to shower and relieve ourselves in an actual bathroom with a toilet and hot water. As we say to a lot of people, if you want to learn how to appreciate the little things in life, go travel in a van for years on end. After our stay at Villas Santa Maria, we hopped back into the van and made our way back out to the coast for a little bit of beach camping. We had been told about a neat little spot where we could camp right close to the water, and we figured it would be pretty criminal to come to Costa Rica and not see the beach. It was incredibly beautiful at our spot, but much like the last time we were oceanside, the humidity was intense. For the 2 nights we lasted in that spot, it felt like we were going to sleep on a freshly rained-on mattress. We have so often spoken about the lessons we learn while traveling like this, and the lesson we have cemented in our minds in these last few months is that we are cold weather Canadians, and we are not ashamed to say it out loud. And as you're probably gathering by now, we don't do too well in hot climates. With a coastal camp in our rear view, we opted to head back towards high elevation, which meant going inland towards the central spine of the country. Our first stop on our way there was Canyon de Liberia, a distinctly different looking area to most of Costa Rica. Where most of Costa Rica is carpeted in lush green flora, this area looked notably more arid. Even the air felt drier, although anything in contrast to the humid coast was going to feel drier at that moment. After a night's stay in Liberia Canyon, we continued further inland. We had plans to meet up with a Costa Rican local and fellow off-road enthusiast/metalhead. Zeka had reached out to us while we were in Guatemala and offered to show us around to some of his favorite spots in the country. After a little more planning, we had chosen a spot on the side of Lake Arenal to meet up. Little did we know, we were about to have a seriously awesome meet and greet.
Well, for the hour that we're supposed to be meeting Zeka, this is not great weather.
So Zeka just arrived, and this place that we're in has turned into a complete, it's just flooded and turned into a massive puddle mud pit. And so we decided we're gonna turn around and go to the other spot, which seems a little more solid. And we backed up 5 feet, and our back end just sunk. We're more stuck than we've ever been right now. So we're winching off. There's lots of big trees to winch off of, so we'll get unstuck here. But the rain outside is soaked in 3 seconds. So Alex is out there setting up the winch, and he is just like a drowned rat. His whole outfit is completely soaked.
Winching ourselves off of a slick and muddy trail in the dumping rain using Zeka's truck as an anchor was not something we were expecting to do that day. But life is full of fun little surprises, and they're made all the better when you embrace them fully. We were treated to a fireside steak dinner, good conversation, and a multitude of Costa Rican delicacies by Zeka that night. This guy knows how to welcome someone to the country. Following our off-roading meet and greet and the first night of camping, we all set out to go find a spot Zeka had stayed at a few years previously. We haven't yet had many opportunities to wander through a country led by a local to the area, but I can tell you now that it certainly has its perks. On-demand translator, intimate knowledge of an area, and no need for GPS are all nice things to travel with.
Zeka's up there getting his camp spot. Seems like we don't make it to camp anymore without it raining. Rainy season.
Okay, baby.
We said see you later to Zeka, then parted ways. There was a rather unique opportunity awaiting us in the mountains, so we'd go do that, then meet up again with Zeka later for another adventure.
So this morning we are off on an exciting adventure. We are near the Caribbean side of Costa Rica, and we are headed to the Pacaware River to do a 3-day river rafting expedition.
A few months prior, the Pacaware Outdoor Center had contacted us and offered us a rafting expedition. With our shipping date closing in as it was, and with a lot of driving remaining, we were barely able to squeak in a trip down the river, but boy are we glad we made it happen. This was an experience to remember.
Oh my gosh, I didn't think the water would be running like this. And those tiny little boats, I'm a bit... Okay, everything will be fine.
Well, babe, you ready? Let's go!
We're already soaking wet from the afternoon rains, the water is already roaring, and we have an 8-kilometer paddle to get to camp. So, let's get this party started. Our accommodations at the Pakuari River Lodge totally took us by surprise. Over the next day, we would relax in a luxury open-air room with a hot shower, king-size bed while surrounded by the Costa Rican rainforest. Without our laptops to do any work, for the first time in months, we had the spare time to read, nap, and really truly rest. The jungle, rain, and wilderness seeped into our minds, relaxing us like we hadn't been for so very long.
All the nests. Look at the plants.
Plants.
So fun.
With some collected R&R and Tarzan practice, it was time to get back on the river. We had 16 kilometers of river to float and some seriously fun Class 5 rapids ahead. Linking back up with Zeca, we began our climb from the outskirts of Costa Rica's capital of San Jose to the peak of Volcán Irazu. We'd be doing a bit of exploring there before making our way to another of Zeca's camp spots. After Irazu, we descended and traveled through what can only be accurately described as a Jurassic Park-like landscape. We eventually arrived at a small finca where we set up camp. In true camping with Zeca form, the rain and the cold rolled in just as camp was made. Luckily, Zeca came through once again and we were cozy beside the fire while the rain battered the awnings. The next morning offered up a beautiful sunrise and clear views of Volcán Turrialba. This would be our final day with Zeka. From here, we'd start our mad dash to the border of Costa Rica and Panama. Our shipping date was days away, and due to the ship being expected to arrive early, our loading date was pushed forward, leaving only 3 days to make it from nearly the middle of Costa Rica to Panama City. So, back through Jurassic Park we went, then down the mountain, through the valley, and up another mountain to find camp for a night further south. After a long drive day, we arrived on a windy and socked-in mountaintop on the provincial border of Cartago and San Jose. That night, we slept just above 3,000 meters. It was cold, quiet, and a perfect last spot in Costa Rica. Another long drive day along high and winding mountain roads delivered us to the Panama border and our final country in Central America.
And there's the Panama side. Not that you can see it with all the rain.
But our drive wasn't done yet. We slept at a campground near the border that night, then recommenced driving early the next morning. We'd need to drive almost the entirety of the length of Panama in one day. Even after the initial news of our shipping date being pushed forward, we figured we still had an extra day or so to drive through Panama. But then our loading date was once again pushed forward, which meant we needed to be in Panama City that day so we could prepare for a police inspection and complete all necessary paperwork and payments before loading.
So we got to Overland Embassy, the campground, yesterday afternoon, and we'll be here for 3 nights. Today is like a sort out the van day. So I'm gonna clean, do laundry, that sort of thing, and Alex is gonna do a bunch of little repairs before we load it into the container. And then tomorrow we do our police check and certification, and then after that's completed we can like pay and do all the paperwork, and then we think on Tuesday we're loading the van into the container.
Before loading, we'd need to measure and make sure that our van would fit in the container. In the case that it didn't, we'd need to make modifications to get the van lower.
Look at that thing. That's cool.
The very reason we installed this medium-height fiberglass top from high-top vans was specifically so that we could fit into a high-cube container. And it looks to be the perfect height despite our lift and tires.
Will allow you to get into the container. 4:50 in the morning. It's loading day. We have an hour drive to get to Cologne.
Hopefully it's fast, and then we can come back and go to our Airbnb and just go to sleep for 3 days.
Yep.
And work.
Let's do it.
Alex is putting the tarp over.
We watched as our container buddies loaded their considerably smaller Toyota RAV4 into the container, and then it was our turn. So in other words, the moment of truth.
Is he riding it? It's risky business, man. Oh my god. 1 inch disper? Yep.
And with an inch to spare, our old girl Betty snuck into the container. No airing down of tires, just the removal of her max air fan.
I think we have a washing machine at our Airbnb. can't see your back. Oh, yeah. The Slow Roamers merch.
Yeah.
How it should be.
Get it dirty.
Dirty.
The container was locked up, seal inspected, and then we left in search of a bed. It had been a chaotic 3 days. We had intended to take a sailboat from Cologne to Cartagena, but when our ship date was changed, it meant we'd need to stay in an Airbnb for 10 days in Panama City before boarding the boat and sailing for 5 days to Colombia. In the meantime, before we sailed, we went to the Panama Canal to watch the boats make their way through the locks, and I have to say, it's truly an engineering marvel. Following that, we mostly stayed in our air-conditioned room and took care of work, while periodically taking walks through the streets of Casco Viejo where we were staying. In an oddly misfortunate turn of events, the ship carrying our van arrived and unloaded on time, which forced us to cancel our sailing to Cartagena, book flights, and fly across the Darien Gap instead. After a short flight in which we only reached cruising altitude for about 10 minutes, we were descending towards Cartagena, Colombia, where we'd start the South American leg of our journey. But one last thing remained. In the sweltering 42-degree heat, Meg, the owner of our van, had to go into port in long sleeves, long pants, boots, and a hard hat to retrieve the van. With that completed, we'd be traveling South America for the next 11 months. It's hard to explain the emotions and feelings that come from completing this leg of our journey. On one hand, wandering our way through so many different countries, encountering so many walks of life and different subcultures was amazing, truly an experience of a lifetime. But on the other hand, it was really hard. The heat of Central America really affected us, and life on the road quickly became a chore. We already know that for many of you, this admission of our reality won't coincide with either your experience of Central America or what you expect life on the road in the tropics might be like. We've had many people already tell us that we're complaining, that we should have expected it, etc. And the reality of it is that we did expect the heat. But our experience of heat living up in Canada could never have prepared us for 2.5 months of living in a place hotter than we had ever experienced. As I've said before, we're not complaining. We're authentically sharing our experience in hopes that others can learn from it. Although beautiful in so many ways, we think that Central America was the most challenging leg of our journey. But we still wouldn't change a thing. Every challenge, welcome or unwelcome, helps us to grow as international overland travelers. It's never going to be all easy, and the more we learned how to accept our reality and work our way through challenging times, the better we'll be when the next challenge comes. Thank you for being here along with us on this journey. We hope in some way we sparked your curiosity. Maybe you even learned something. At the very least, we hope we showed you a world worth exploring, worth protecting and valuing. Now get out and go on that next adventure. Make the memories that stick with you, shape you, and change you. Until the next one, keep on roaming. If you would like to see behind-the-scenes content, get route and camp spot information, or if you'd just like to help support us by putting some gas in our tank each month, you can contribute on Patreon or through memberships on our YouTube channel. Oh hey there bud, before you go, don't forget to go on over to slowroamers.com to get yourself some rad Slow Roamers merch. We've even got some new stickers and stuff in there for ya. For additional photos and commentary on our journey, you can follow along on Facebook and Instagram. Well, Central America, you were beautiful. You taught us a thing or two. You made us tougher. We're gonna miss ya. Love ya. Goodbye.